You are nothing but a freeloader, Natalie, living in our house like you own the place." Susan's voice screeched through the speaker, layered over the distant wind and laughter. She was calling from a luxury suite on a Mediterranean cruise ship. I was standing in the silent, empty foyer of the Victorian estate my mother had left solely to me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply tapped the red button to end the call. The silence returned instantly. I walked to the heavy oak front door and turned the deadbolt. Click. They were never coming back inside. To understand why I locked the door, you have to understand the house. My mother called it the Painted Lady. It wasn't just a Victorian estate. It was a living, breathing work of art, sitting on 3 acres of emerald green lawn. It smelled of lemon oil, old cedar, and the lavender my mother dried in the sunroom. Every spindle on the staircase, every pane of stained glass in the foyer, she had restored with her own hands. When she passed, she didn't just leave me a property. She left me her soul. She left me a legacy wrapped in gingerbread trim and slate shingles. And for 2 years I had let parasites infest it. It started with a plea. My father, Brian, had sat me down in the kitchen shortly after the funeral. He looked gray and defeated. He told me his new business venture had collapsed. He and his new wife Susan were drowning in rent they couldn't afford. "Just for 6 months, Nat," he begged, his eyes wet. "Just until we get back on our feet. We won't get in your way. We'll be like ghosts." I was 22, grieving, desperate to hold on to the only family I had left. So I said yes. I opened the door. 6 months turned into a year. A year became 2. The ghosts became loud and permanent. Susan brought with her a cloud of synthetic perfume that masked my mother's lavender. She brought furniture that belonged in a sterile dentist's waiting room, sharp angles and beige fabric clashing violently with the warm mahogany of the parlor. But the furniture wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the lie. At first I didn't notice. I was busy with my landscape architecture firm, leaving before they woke and coming home after dinner. But the comments started slipping out. Susan would trail her hand along a wall and say, "When we finally remodel this drafty old junk, we're opening up this whole wall." She'd snap at me if I left a design blueprint on the dining table. "Natalie, please keep your work in the servants' quarters. We have guests coming."
Servants' quarters?
She meant the small guest suite I had moved into, so they could have the master bedroom. I confronted my father late one night. "I can't tell her the truth, Nat," he whispered, glancing at the ceiling as if she could hear through the floorboards. "If she knew the house was yours, she'd feel like a guest." He had erased my ownership to buy his wife comfort. He had reduced me to a squatter in my own inheritance. "You have to tell her," I said. "I will," he promised. "I just need the right moment." That moment never came. I became the living maid. I fixed plumbing, pruned the roses, paid property taxes, and Susan treated me like an employee she couldn't wait to fire. She saw my mother's legacy as a teardown and me as an obstacle. I was paralyzed by the fear of losing my father completely, so I let it happen. People ask why I didn't throw them out sooner. How a professional, managing million-dollar projects, let herself be reduced to a guest in her own home. The answer isn't simple. It's scientific. It's biology. There's a theory about the boiling frog. Drop a frog into boiling water, it jumps to save itself. Put it in tepid water and slowly heat it, it adjusts and eventually dies, exhausted, unaware of the danger. That's what happened to me. They didn't storm the castle, they invaded by degrees. It started with the small things. The vase. The parking spot. The studio. I adjusted my body, my mind, my life, telling myself it was just temporary. But by the time the water boiled, I was too immersed to jump. Then came the rain. A massive storm rolled in off the coast, battering the old house for 3 days straight. On the second night, I woke to the sound of dripping. The slate roof, original to the house and desperately in need of restoration, had finally given way. Water pooled in the upstairs hallway, ruining plaster and threatening the hardwood floors below. I panicked. I called 3 emergency roofers, but everyone was booked due to the storm. That's when my father stepped in. "I know a guy," he said, surveying the damage with genuine concern. Old friend from my contracting days. He specializes in slate. He can squeeze us in, but he needs a deposit up front for materials. He quoted me $8,500. Almost half of my liquid savings, but the house was bleeding. I wrote the check directly to him, shaking. Please, save the roof, I begged. He looked me in the eye, smiling gently. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take care of it. 3 days later the rain stopped, but no roofer appeared. When I asked my father, he mumbled something about a supply chain delay and avoided my gaze. I wanted to believe him. Then came Tuesday. I was at work, scrolling through Instagram during lunch, when a photo froze me in place. Kelsey, my 16-year-old stepsister, was posing in a white bikini, holding a glass of champagne on a Greek balcony. The location tag read, Santini, Greece. Caption, surprise vaquée. Thanks, Daddy, for making dreams come true. Cruising blessed Euro trip. I swiped. There was Susan, Kelsey, and my father, all smiling, tanned, clearly enjoying luxury instead of buying slate. I checked my banking app. The $8,500 check had cleared. The payee wasn't a roofing company, it was cash. The realization hit like a physical blow. There was no roofer, no supply chain issue. My father had taken my money to fund their vacation while the house suffered. They had stolen the roof over my head for a view of the ocean. The house seemed to sense the violation. The air felt heavy, stagnant. I spent 2 days going through the motions at work, my mind stuck on that photo of my father in Greece. Then Thursday, a deep rumbling shook the floorboards. I ran to the window. A massive yellow excavator rolled across my lawn, tearing up the grass my mother had meticulously planted. A pickup with Miller Construction on the side followed. I sprinted outside. Hey! I shouted. A burly man in a hard hat climbed out of the truck. Work order for the greenhouse demo, he said, pointing to the delicate glass structure at the edge of the property. Client wants a lap pool. We're digging today. Wait, what client? I demanded, planting myself between the machine and the greenhouse. Mrs. Susan Miller and Mr. Brian Miller scheduled this 3 weeks ago. They're out of town, told us to start, he said. Dizzy, I realized. My sanctuary, the greenhouse where my mother had taught me to propagate succulents, was about to be destroyed, all while they vacationed. Susan wasn't just modernizing, she was erasing. Stop everything. I shouted. My voice shook but carried authority. They don't own this property. Ido. The foreman, Frank, looked skeptical. Look. Lady, I've got a signed contract and a deposit check. Check will bounce, I said flatly, just like the one for the roof. Frank paused. He looked at the excavator, then back at me. He pulled out his phone, calling the office. 2 tense minutes passed. Finally, he returned, face grim. Check didn't clear. Bank returned it this morning, insufficient funds. Relief flooded me. I'm sorry, I said. My father, he's not honest. Frank spat on the ground. Waste of time, waste of gas, he muttered, signaling the operator to kill the engine. Silence fell, heavy and tense. I took a deep breath. A plan formed, crystal clear. I pulled the deed from my pocket, showing him the house was mine. I have a job for you, I said. Eviction. Everything that isn't mine, dumpster. Today. Cash, double your day rate. Frank studied me, then the house. Slowly, a grim smile spread across his face. The sun was setting when a taxi pulled into the driveway. My father, Susan, and Kelsey piled out, sun-kissed and laughing. Their luggage was stacked high. Perfectly picturesque, until they saw the massive orange dumpster in front of the garage, filled with Susan's beige sofas, Kelsey's ring lights, and my father's golf clubs. It looked like a modern art installation. The consequences of greed. Susan froze. She didn't look at the dumpster first. She looked at me, standing at the door, locks changed hours ago. What is this? She shrieked. Our furniture in the trash? Have you lost your mind? I'm renovating, I said calmly. The invasive species had to go. Susan lunged for the handle but stopped. Frank and his crew emerged, arms crossed. "Step back," he said. "I'm calling the police," Susan spat. "Already here," I said, pointing down the driveway. A patrol car rolled up. I walked down, holding a manila folder. "Officer," I said. "I'm the homeowner. These people are trespassing." The officer looked at my father. "Lease?" "No," he whispered. Susan gasped, turning on him. "What did you say?" "They lied," I said, voice steady. "I'm the owner. They were parasites, not family. And now, the host is done feeding you." The police escorted them away, the taxi driver awkwardly reloading luggage. I felt no triumph, only quiet clarity. I had nothing left to give, and now they had nothing left to take. I turned back to the house, closed the door, and turned the deadbolt. Click. Final. My life, reclaimed. The silence after the police left was profound. Yet it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that fills a cathedral once the bells stop ringing. A resonant, vibrating stillness. I stood on the porch for a long time, watching dust settle on the driveway where the dumpster had been. The invasive ivy had been cut away at the root. The parasites were gone, and for the first time in 2 years, the house seemed to take a deep, relieved breath. I stepped inside. The air already felt different. The cloying scent of Susan's synthetic perfume was fading, replaced by the faint, clean smell of old wood and lemon oil. The living room was blissfully empty of beige sofas and ring lights. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors my mother had refinished. It didn't feel lonely, it felt spacious. It felt like I had finally reclaimed the oxygen in my own life. I walked toward the greenhouse. The yellow excavator tracks were ugly scars across the lawn, a violent reminder of how close I had come to losing everything. But the glass structure still stood. It caught the last rays of the setting sun, glowing like a jewel. I stepped inside, the humid, earthy smell wrapping around me like a hug. My mother's orchids were still there, neglected but alive. People tell you that cutting off family is a tragedy, that you will feel a phantom limb where those relationships once existed. They are wrong. Standing there, surrounded by the quiet hum of growing things, I realized a fundamental truth. Subtraction is actually addition. We are conditioned to believe that more is always better. More family, more people, more noise. But when I subtracted my father's lies, Susan's cruelty, and Kelsey's entitlement, my life didn't shrink. It expanded infinitely. The space once occupied by anxiety, constant vigilance, and exhaustion suddenly became wide open. For the first time in years I felt free. I hadn't lost a family, I had lost a liability. I had gained a sanctuary. The following week, Frank, the foreman, returned. He didn't bring the excavator this time. He brought a crew of honest roofers who specialized in historic slate. He refused a deposit. "You pay me when it's dry inside," he said, shaking my hand. We drank coffee on the porch while the crew worked. I realized then that I had found more integrity in a stranger I had hired to evict my family than I had ever found in the man who shared my DNA. I spent the next month restoring the house. I painted over beige walls with colors my mother would have loved. Deep greens, soft creams, vibrant blues. I parked my car in the garage again, moved my drafting table back into the sunroom, and woke up each morning without a knot in my stomach. Yesterday, I planted a new bed of lavender in the greenhouse. As I dug my hands into the soil, I thought again about the boiling frog. How easy it is to stay in water that slowly harms you because you fear the cold air outside. But the air isn't cold, it's fresh, it's clean, and it's mine. For the first time, I felt the full weight of that truth. I didn't need to apologize for reclaiming my space. I didn't need to justify my boundaries or hope my father would finally do the right thing. I was no longer adapting to the discomfort of others. I was creating comfort for myself. Over the weeks, I restored not only the physical space, but also the sense of ownership and peace my mother had left behind. Each repaired corner, each freshly painted wall, each clean window was a reminder. This was my home, my inheritance, my life. I also learned to trust in the people I chose, not the ones dictated by blood. Frank and his crew weren't just contractors. They were a reminder that integrity exists outside family, that loyalty can be found in strangers when family fails. Their presence reaffirmed my belief in human decency, and in the quiet satisfaction of doing things right. And as the first flowers bloomed and the sunlight streamed into the sunroom, where blueprints now lay neatly on my drafting table, I felt a quiet triumph. It wasn't loud or boastful. It wasn't vengeance, it was reclamation. I had taken back what was mine, and in doing so, I had found clarity. This house, the Painted Lady, was no longer a battleground. It was a sanctuary, a space where life could grow without interference. It was a testament to my resilience, a living proof that standing up for yourself, even when it's terrifying, is always worth it. The true revenge had been subtle. Not screaming, not confrontation, but the act of reclaiming and restoring, letting consequences catch up with those who had overstepped. The quiet power of ownership had spoken louder than any words I could have shouted. And so, standing amidst the lavender and orchids, I understood. Some battles are won not with anger, but with steadfast patience and unwavering resolve. The house had healed, and so had I. The parasites were gone, and my sanctuary, finally, was mine. With the house restored, I finally had the space to breathe, and to think. The Painted Lady was no longer just walls and windows. It was a living chronicle of my mother's vision, my inheritance, and my own resilience. Every corner, every piece of restored wood, every bloom in the garden was proof that I had reclaimed not just a property, but my life. The days that followed were quiet, intentional. I moved my drafting table back into the sunroom, cleared of any distractions or remnants of the family who had invaded it. I worked on my landscape projects with renewed focus, designing gardens that honored the balance of beauty and purpose, just as I had learned from my mother. I spent mornings walking through the garden, pruning roses, tending to lavender, and ensuring that the house breathed the way it was meant to. The air smelled of citrus, cedar, and earth, the sense of home, not intrusion. Even the greenhouse, scarred slightly from the excavator's tracks, felt alive again. The orchids thrived, and I added new plants, each a small victory over the years of neglect. People often equate revenge with anger and spectacle. But my revenge had been measured, deliberate, and silent. It wasn't about humiliation or spectacle, it was about restoration. By reclaiming my home, I had removed the parasitic influence of people who had only seen what they could take from me. They had lived as if entitled, but the reality was simple. I was the owner, the steward, and the final authority. When my father called afterward, pleading, trying to explain, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I listened quietly, the calm clarity of ownership flowing through me. I realized that I didn't need to justify my actions. His deception, Susan's entitlement, Kelsey's selfishness, they had shown me exactly why I had done what I did. No explanation could erase their choices, but I didn't need forgiveness or reconciliation to feel whole. I began documenting the restoration, photographing the gardens, the sunroom, the living spaces, and sharing small glimpses with friends and colleagues. The Painted Lady became a symbol, not of wealth or status or inheritance, but of perseverance, dignity, and reclamation. It was proof that boundaries matter, that patience and resolve can reclaim what is rightfully yours. And slowly, life returned to normal in the best possible way. I invited trusted friends into the home, sharing meals in the restored parlor, hosting small gatherings in the sunroom, teaching them about my mother's legacy and the gardens I had rebuilt. The house wasn't silent anymore. It hummed with life, laughter, and the quiet joy of ownership restored. In the weeks that followed, I reflected on the lessons learned. People are not always what they seem, even family. Trust must be measured, boundaries maintained, and self-respect defended. Love and loyalty can be manipulated, and grief can be weaponized against you. But standing firm, reclaiming your space, physical or emotional, is not just justified, it's necessary. The final chapter of the Painted Lady's story wasn't about punishment. It was about healing. I learned that subtraction, the removal of toxicity, doesn't shrink life. It expands it, creating room for clarity, peace, and authentic joy. I planted new beds of flowers in the greenhouse and around the estate, symbolizing growth after removal. Each bloom was a reminder that beauty often grows from effort and persistence. Each day, I woke without the knot of fear or anxiety in my chest. Each night, I fell asleep to the quiet harmony of a home fully mine. Standing on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the estate, I realized the truth. The painted lady had survived storms, invasions, and neglect, just as I had. And like the house, I emerged stronger, steadier, and more vibrant than ever before. Sometimes you have to burn the bridges that are toxic, prune the branches that drain your life, and reclaim the space you deserve. And sometimes, the most beautiful gardens grow not in spite of what was lost, but because of what you finally removed. I turned the deadbolt one last time that evening. Click! It was the sound of finality, of sovereignty, of a life reclaimed. I was no longer a guest, a servant, or a passive observer. I was the owner, the guardian, and the inheritor of a legacy, and of my own peace. The painted lady was mine. My sanctuary, my home, my victory. And as the evening air filled with the scent of lavender, cedar, and lemon oil, I knew. This was the sound of freedom,